All right, welcome everybody. My name is Travis Smith. I'm the director of growth for Psi Upsilon Fraternity, and I'm here to tell you a little bit more about some best practices for co-ed or gender inclusive chapters and recruitment. Um, I think we really have prided ourselves as an organization on friendship and being boundless when it comes to who can be a member of Psi Upsilon, and it really leads to some positive change. We're on the front edge of what it means to be a fraternity in this country. If you look at the history, we'll go into that a little bit later. You'll see kind of a drastic change in the fraternity movement over the last 40, 50 years. And in the grand scope of things, that's a lot of change in a short period of time, even though it may not feel like it in the moment. The goals today, though, are to kind of get through four key areas that you can focus on with your own chapter to make sure that your recruitment efforts are strong. And we'll give you a few takeaways and ways to measure success as well. So some of the core principles, we've got to think about inclusivity in the context of Greek life. Most of these fraternities, or most fraternities, started as single gender organizations, including Psi Upsilon way back in the 1830s. Back then women didn't go to college, so there was no language that was written into the Constitution to exclude women or others from being members because it really wasn't an issue back then. It's one of the kind of neat pieces of history about Psi Upsilon that I love is that language being so open really led to the future of this organization having the context of allowing women to be members or members of any gender to participate in the fraternity experience. This is hundreds of years in the making. We know many fraternities started on a faith basis as well, and some grew out of the fact that their faith or culture was discriminated against and they couldn't join existing groups on their campus. Diversity efforts really didn't start to take shape until the civil rights movement, the 50s, 60s, and 70s really shaped a lot of what the future of fraternity was going to be when many groups started dropping their exclusionary status throughout that time. But most groups did choose to remain single gender at that point in time. That's when Psi Upsilon took a hard look at itself and said, we want the chapters to be able to decide what they want. And there's no reason for us to limit their scope and their interest. But the movement toward diversity is really new in the context of Psi Upsilon and fraternity. Like I mentioned earlier, it's only about 60 years old compared to being 190 years old as an organization. So this change may look like it's coming slowly, but it's happening at a rocket pace. Really, really quickly changing the dynamic of what it means to be a fraternity in today's day and age. Diversity has been a kind of a key inclusionary word in college campuses for the last couple of decades now. And really a lot of effort's been moved toward making sure there's diversity, equity, and inclusion programs on campuses. A lot of chapters instituted DEI chairs and things of that nature to help make sure that we are being inclusive. In gender inclusive chapters or co-ed chapters, there's not necessarily a less need to do that, but I think we just have to look at it a little bit differently. And we'll get into some more details about that later. And then I think the other piece, and core principle is, we have to align our recruitment with organizational values. That's not exclusive to co-ed or gender inclusive chapters, but it is something that's really important. We need to identify who we are, what we're about, so that we connect with the right people on campus who share those values, because that's what's going to drive true friendships and true family dynamics within the chapter, and getting the right people who are going to help you continue to grow your chapter moving forward. So the best practices, I'm really going to focus on these four areas: inclusive marketing and branding, diverse partnerships and outreach, value-based recruitment, and data-driven improvement. inclusive leadership and fostering a supportive fraternity environment is a key component of this. We have to be thoughtful about how we're connecting with our members and connecting with our potential members. We have to be thinking about what the chapter experience is like, not only, as we're recruiting people, but as they're retained as members of our organization. So we want to create some feedback loops and opportunities to make sure that we're being thoughtful and mindful of who our members are, what their struggles and their needs are, and that we're meeting those in appropriate ways. So we'll explore some strategies for integrating inclusivity into leadership practices, decision-making processes, and conflict resolution. I think highlighting, we need to highlight the importance of leading by example as well. As your organization may be some of the most inclusive, and particularly in the fraternity space on your campus, this is a great opportunity for you to take shape and lead and be seen on your campuses. And I think that could be really important as well. And then getting into some of these data-driven kind of side of things, one of the things I might introduce is the idea of KPIs, and that's key performance indicators, for those who may not be familiar with that terminology. So key performance indicators are measures of how do we know we're on the right track, or how do we know we're actually making progress? Very similar to having goals and having some objectives to those goals. How do we know that we're moving the needle? What are some goals that we're going to set for ourselves that will help us make sure that we are doing the right things and we're making progress toward our ends? So as we look at inclusive marketing and branding, first kind of core component of best practices, I think one of the things that I would encourage you all to do is look at all your marketing materials. Are they using inclusive language and imagery? A lot of times, even if you're a close co-ed or inclusive group, you may not necessarily pick the right stock photo or certain things that represent your organization. Or if you have a picture of your chapter in action and it's only the men or only the women in your chapter, it may not necessarily be coming across as an inclusive environment. So looking at what's on your social media, looking at what's on your flyers, websites, or any other kind of marketing materials that you put out on your campus, to make sure that not only does it speak to people who are looking for that kind of inclusive nature in the language it uses, but also the imagery that you're putting there. Replacing gendered terms like brotherhood with inclusive alternatives like community or fellowship could be an option. Ensuring promotional images represent diversity of not only gender, but ethnicity, body types, abilities, can be a great way for people to see your organization as an option for them. So many times fraternity is seen as such an exclusionary type of a group. And for many of our co-ed and gender inclusive groups, it's the exact opposite of that. It's a place where everybody can be welcomed and supported, though we may attract a smaller subset of that population. So using some of those identity ideas to allow more people to find you and to see your organization as a place that they can thrive will only do well by you. The other thing I would say is, looking at diverse membership stories and achievements, like putting stuff out there. Can you do a membership spotlight that posts to your social media highlighting diverse members' achievements and experiences? If you can do things that really highlight the breadth of your organization and the breadth of your membership, it can really speak to different people in different ways. And so putting things out there and certainly using social media to highlight the inclusivity of the group is a great way for you to really set the stage for people to find you and for the right people to find you. Thinking about kind of maybe an example, the Beta Theta Pi at MIT revamped their recruitment brochure to showcase members from various backgrounds engaged in academic, social, community service activities. And they saw a 40% increase in diverse applicants the following semester. So, from one of the things you may even consider doing to help kind of drive this effort is you might form a marketing committee within your chapter that reviews anything that you put up, any materials you publish, anything that you put up around campus, with the lens of, is this promoting who we truly want to promote ourselves to be? Can you do that? Can you enlist certain people to make sure they're looking at it with a critical lens, um, not only for typos and things like that, but for inclusivity and making sure that it connects to people, um, to make sure that we're getting the broadest audience that we possibly can. Um, so, I talked a little bit about like KPIs earlier on. One of the things that you might consider, thinking about is what would be a way that you could put a KPI to this? What would be a performance measure that would tell you that your work is making a difference? Um, an example of that might be increasing the diverse applicants by 30% within one recruitment cycle. So, during your primary recruitment, are you getting 30% more applicants? And are they still representing the diversity of the group? So things like that might be something you want to think about. We certainly, if you have questions or comments about that, I'm happy to take those at the end of the session, to address them and help you kind of identify what KPIs might make sense for your chapter. So if you want to throw those in the chat, we'll get to those later. Or if you want to, schedule a meeting with me, I'll have my contact information at the end of the slide. I'm happy to sit down with you in your chapter to address any specific kind of performance indicators that you may find valuable. With diverse partnerships and outreach, this is all about networking. We've got to get your organization and your members positioned to know more people. That is truly the best driver of recruitment success for any chapter, is you recruit who you know. And the more people you know, the more opportunities you have to recruit. And so one of the things I would suggest is, if you can form partnerships with 3 to 5 other campus organizations each year, or each semester, um, groups that you will partner with to do an event, or that you invite to one of your events to just hang out and get to know your members. It doesn't have to be a signed agreement between the organizations that you're going to do X and they're going to do Y, but you need to start developing some partnerships and some working relationships with other groups on campus. That will really increase your profile. It'll help more people know the type of organization you are and sing your praises to people that you're not even meeting. I think that can be really beneficial. I think the piece with that is, collaboration. Anytime you can collaborate with these groups, you're going to build trust. You're going to have access to the members in those groups. And it's just another opportunity to make more friends. The more friends you have, the more people you have to invite to come to things. And that creates more opportunity to recruit people from those organizations to be part of your organization as well. Because in most cases, I'm not talking about doing things with groups that are exclusive in membership where they couldn't join SciU and be part of what they're part of. Can you invite them to participate and speak at your recruitment events? Maybe there's an opportunity for you to introduce some of these partnerships and the things that you do in an exciting way to your potential new members. There could be great ways to, show them that being part of a fraternity is a lot more than just being in the fraternity. It's about getting involved in your community. It's about doing something to promote, philanthropic efforts in the community, or service efforts in the community. And so think about how you can leverage that to even make your organization look bigger, stronger, or more attractive to students who share those values. You can engage alumni from different backgrounds in recruitment efforts. There may be some folks that you can reach out to, and hopefully some of you are already doing this. But expand your resources. I know when I went through recruitment 20 some odd years ago, 30 some odd years ago, I went to some recruitment events where the alumni were talking about the value the fraternity experience had to them and why they're still involved and invested. And it really spoke to me in a way of said, hey, this is more than just fun for 4 years. This is actually something that can help me build my career, help me network, help me get opportunities that I maybe never anticipated. I'll give you kind of an example, again, similar to the Beta Theta Pi one from the last slide. So Alpha Phi Omega at UC Berkeley partnered with Campus LGBTQ+ Resource Center to host a queer history and Greek life panel discussion. That event attracted students who never considered joining a fraternity before. And so they had a whole new audience and way to reach more people than they have ever had. Um, Similar to the last slide, I'm going to also give you kind of an implementation tip. If you can assign a partnership coordinator role within your chapter to manage those relationships, that can be really powerful. You want to make sure that you're investing time and energy into those relationships, and if you can give somebody that responsibility or leadership opportunity, that can really give them a chance to shine, but also make sure that you're giving intentionality to those relationships and making sure that they're lasting and valuable. Um, KPI in this area might be doubling the number of recruitment attendees, from non-traditional backgrounds, like looking at where you're getting members from is broadening because you have more resource access through these partnerships that you're creating. Values-based recruitment. This is something that if you've done any of the Fired Up training that we partner with, you'll probably heard this ad nauseum, but I think it's really important as we continue to try and drive forward the type of organization you are. We want to make sure that it's connected to the core values. So a couple of things that you may want to consider doing. How do you communicate your values in a way that emphasizes inclusivity, that talks about who you are as an individual chapter? There are certainly, broad SciU values that encompass all of our chapters, but what makes you different? What makes you individual and unique? And what are those values that you hold dear that you want to make sure everybody connects to? So, defining and communicating those values, designing events around those values, and then training your team to have meaningful conversations about that. Don't expect because somebody is diverse that they necessarily have the right tools to have a conversation about what that means with somebody. It really is an opportunity for you to recognize and provide opportunities for your members to learn and to be able to talk more thoughtfully about the experience that your chapter provides. So maybe things you might consider doing, holding a chapter-wide workshop to define your core values, designing recruitment events that demonstrate those values. We talked a little bit about that. What are some things that you could do if, one of your values is service, you obviously could do a service event as part of your recruitment events, and that would demonstrate those values in action. Training your recruitment team to articulate how the chapter lives those values daily. It's simple to sometimes just use keywords in certain language that consistently applied make a difference when people hear it over and over again. And so if you can distill it down into some core language that can be trained to your members, that can really be helpful as you articulate that with anybody who's potentially going to become a member so they understand it in a better way. You could create a values compatibility questionnaire for potential new members or have a series of questions that you ask them in an interview setting to make sure that you're learning about them in a way that helps you know that they're going to be a good member for the organization and have that values compatibility. DU at Northwestern, centered their recruitment week around 5 core values. So each day was a different activity with discussions related to one value, allowing their potential members to see how those values were manifested in their chapter life. So if you wanted to pick a series of those and create each day as a recruitment event, that could be a neat way to kind of diversify the types of activities you're doing as well, but also who they're going to speak to and really get people to know who the chapter is on a very, very deep level. Another maybe implementation tip here would be create a values ambassador program where current members share personal stories of how the chapter's values impacted their college experience. How did being a member of this organization make somebody's life better? How did being connected to a bunch of people that share core values help somebody be more successful in college? I think everybody who's joined one of these types of chapters is going to have that story. I know I certainly have it from my organization. And I would say my organization didn't have all this stuff that we're talking about together. We were in a very much chaotic phase when I was a new member, and still had a lot of positive stories about how that experience helped me grow. But thinking about how we could incorporate these things in a thoughtful way would really impact the member experiences that your own members are having in a way that they'll be able to talk about with other people and get other people excited about being part of this organization. KPI in this area might be thinking about like how this impacts retention of new members. Is this, if you get people that are more aligned with your values from day one, they're probably more likely to stay. They're not going to drop out. They're not going to join and then realize, oh, this isn't what I thought it was. So if you can increase your retention rate of new members by 25% from the previous year, that might be a great way to mark a key performance indicator that shows we're making progress. And then lastly, data-driven improvement. I think this is one of those areas that so many times we lack, and our recruitment chairs, once recruitment is over, oftentimes they think their job is over. They've done recruitment and they can kind of sit back and relax until the next cycle. But I think data is really important for us to look at. Obviously systems are how we build our success, but if we don't have a way of identifying, using KPIs and doing these different pieces to show what's effective, what's not effective, we're going to continue spinning our wheels or doing the same things over and over that don't produce results, or not necessarily adapting with the times as they're coming. So I would say some of the things in this area would be like, do you implement a digital system, whether it's Google Forms and Sheets to collect and analyze recruitment data? Some of you use Chapter Builder. Can you use that to collect data on elements of recruitment in a way that will tell you, what your conversion rate is, what, types of things are making a dent in people saying yes to you? Can you track your metrics, like demographic information of applicants and new members? Conversion rates from like info sessions or introductory meetings to actual membership, retention rates of your new members, like we talked about just a minute ago. You do satisfaction scores on post-recruitment surveys to track like what did people like about it. Use the newest members that you have to learn about what they connected with best and what they liked most about your recruitment strategies, and use that to adjust and adapt. It's a great way to listen to them as well and make them feel involved in the chapter in a way that will help them start taking some ownership from a very early phase. Holding a post-recruitment analysis meeting, I think, is one of maybe the most important things that we can do every year in every chapter, to review that data and adjust your strategies. To even hear anecdotally from people, that's still data. It may not be as measurable and actionable as some of these other things that we talked about, but if you do that strategically at the end of every recruitment session, you're going to take some of that information, put it down in a system, whether it's a Google Sheet or a form or something, put it in your Asana project that you can use to transition to the next person when you transition them into the role. But make sure that there's recordings of that data in a way that will allow somebody to continue to use that to refine the efforts, even if it's not you. So Phi Sigma Pi at UCLA used data analysis to identify their morning recruitment events, had a significantly lower turnout from commuter students, and they adjusted their schedule, offering more evening events, which resulted in an increase of 35% commuter student participation. This is a way to look at, if you see the data and you say, people just aren't coming on Saturdays or Wednesdays or mornings, that might be a no-brainer for some of you, but if we look at the data, it might tell you some really interesting things that you can use to adjust your strategies. Implementation tip, if you can find a statistics or data science student in your chapter, or in one of these partner organizations that we talked about earlier, maybe they can help you create some visualizations and reports from your recruitment data that you can use to really demonstrate it in a way that people can connect with it. Can you find a way to distill that data into very clear and understandable terms that you can then present to your chapter or present to others to show why things are being successful or where they're being successful and where they're not, so that you can stop wasting time trying to convince people, and you can start working on making those progressive adjustments and adaptations to make your recruitment better. Um, a KPI in this area might be, 20% year over year um, improvement in overall recruitment goals. Are we actually showing measurable success at the end of every recruitment because we've analyzed and we've looked at everything we're doing and we're making adjustments that allow us to be more successful? So looking at that, I mean, there's the four key strategy areas: inclusive marketing and branding, diverse partnerships and outreach, values-based recruitment, and data-driven improvement. Uh, we want to look at the overall implementation strategy here. Like, if you can focus on those four key areas, providing specific actionable strategies, you can improve the recruitment performance and create a more inclusive environment. Um, the goal is not just to increase members, but build a stronger, more diverse community that enriches the experience of all members. And so one thing you might want to consider is, do you create a task force within your chapter to focus on this, making sure they're looking at those four key strategies, they're monitoring progress and setting and adjusting those KPIs to make sure that they're working for you, that they're reporting back to the chapter regularly. They have a role, they have a responsibility to educate the rest of the chapter on what's going on, and that they propose new ideas and adjustments based on that data and feedback. So it's not just the recruitment chair, it's not just the president or Archon doing all the work. This could be distributed throughout your chapter, and you give more people opportunities to step into leadership in a way that will help your chapter be successful. That is the conclusion of my presentation. We will certainly have an opportunity for question and answer or sharing later on. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and click to the last slide so you can see my contact information. Please feel free to use that email or phone number to contact me. You can text that number as well. But I'd be happy to schedule a time to talk with you about your own individual chapter efforts and make sure that there's opportunities for us to support you and refine and coach and support the types of activities and initiatives that you have going on at your chapter level. With that, I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording, and we'll go into the Q&A section of the presentation.